Tonight, I am talking to you about Move Out and Draw Fire, which is a set of wargame rules for the Bush and proxy wars from 53 to 79 in the last century. And it does feel odd to say that. I have spent some time playtesting the infantry on infantry, which is the primary use case here, right? The primary purpose of these rules was platoon on platoon action set in the Vietnam War. However, the rules for armor actually look like they could also be usable in an armor on armor engagement. Prior to doing the next playtest, I had to prepare a couple of things. First, I needed to prepare the smoke screens because I wanted to test that on the board as well. A call for fire for smoke, which involves six 3x5 index cards side by side. Here you can see that it's fairly easy to craft this. The lines do bleed through a little bit. You could cut these out to be cute little clouds and paint them with gray and white. But essentially, you take one 3x5 card, you put the lines on both sides facing each other, so the white portion is out, and then you bend the bottoms, and it works quite nicely. These can also be used for an individual smoke grenade, in which case um, one of these screens would be up, or if a vehicle fired its smoke screen, it would be one of these. And then I think a burning vehicle or burning house, you get three of these screens. They last for 2 turns, and then on the final turn, optionally, they drift with the wind. And we'll see that in the game. The other thing I needed to do was to craft some vehicles. The vehicles have a couple of stats that are important, and I'm still working on, well, now that I've run the game, I know what I need to have on the vehicle cards, and I'm considering preparing a set of printouts that are appropriately sized for the 1 to 72 range scale. It's difficult to find top-down um, draftsman kind of views of each of these vehicles. I found one for like a Sheridan, I'll show you in a second, but essentially I cut out some circles to represent the turrets and the guns that are mounted to the turrets. I made some 3x5 cards with both red, in this case purple, and blue borders to represent US forces versus communist forces. And lastly, I placed an indicator arrow on what was the front of the vehicle. And I did that with some drafting tools and a little bit of, not a whole lot of effort. But again, to make it easier for people to get this to the table, I think I need a template sheet for this kind of stuff. Now, the game itself, as with the prior game, I started with the pre-turn sequence of generating random terrain. In this case, we had, 4, 15, 17, 9, 5, 11, 13, 18. And again, it goes defensive player versus offensive player. The Vietnamese, because their vehicles are ranked less less powerfully than the US vehicles that I put together for this scenario, the Vietnamese forces are the defenders. The defenders get to pick the first piece of the 8 pieces of the terrain to place on the board. They can place it in any location with any orientation. This is what I created for myself, was a small 3x5 cheat sheet for all the vehicles in the game. So you can see here that the M48A3, the Patton tank used by the US forces, has a penetration resistance of 16 at the front of the vehicle, 12 on the flanks of the vehicle, and 9 at the rear of the vehicle. It's armed with a 90 millimeter gun and a 50 cal. It has 105 points tournament cost, and it weighs 48 metric tons, which has to do with the number of essentially hull points that it can absorb before the vehicle is destroyed. The T-54, on the other hand, has 20 penetration resistance at the front of the vehicle, 8 in the rear, 12 on the flanks. The 100 millimeter cannon was originally designated as just costing, this vehicle with that cannon was costed out at 41 points in my initial pass through rules. That is incorrect. I think it's going to be much higher because that is obviously a main gun. And the T-54 is 36 metric tons. M113, I won't go through each of these. Each team had 2 battle tanks. They had 2 infantry carriers. In the case of the commies, they had the BTR-50 and the US had the 113A1. And then they both had basically a deuce and a half. They were 2.5-ton trucks, the ZIL 157 for the commies and the M35 deuce and a half for the US forces. But the tournament costing, you can tell that the BTR is ranked lower than the M113. The T-54 should be higher, but maybe not as high as the M48 for a couple of reasons. Here is that top-down view architectural diagram, basically, of the Sheridan, which was one of the other tanks in the Vietnam era. This is a vehicle that was designed for airborne drops. So it is basically a light tank. But again, it's got the Modus up top. I again, I'm not going to be able to find these for each of the vehicles from the period, especially once you get back into the Anzac forces and into the French forces against the Viet Minh. There's just not diagrams of that stuff. I've already looked. So I don't think I'm going to be able to give this to the players, which is unfortunate, but true. We're going to have to be a more abstract token sheet for them to use. Okay, so the terrain that actually got selected by the dice here was clear, pond, scrub, sand, hut, hills, a hill that's denuded, a dune, and an agricultural area. The way that actually played out was that the board looked like this. The huts, you roll 1d6 to see how many huts are concentrically located around the central hut, and I ended up with 5, so I've got quite a large village here. Because that is on the VC baseline, the VC have the potential to place either militia or civilians in those huts. And then, like the coward he hid his truck and his BTR behind the village, so they couldn't be shot. The agricultural area is actually that palm tree section off to the left. It's more of an orchard. There's scrub down central middle. There's the denuded hill off to the right. There's a pond centrally located. Up to the upper right is a sandy area, and that's large and brown. And then to the left is a swatch, a carpet swatch representing a dune. So I imagine this is a coastal area village, maybe in the south. Once the vehicles were placed within 12 inches of the baseline, you can see that these 3x5 cards, by being a little oversized for 172, and the fact that I'm only using a 4x4, 4-foot by 4-foot table for the war game, makes this really a knife fight. It's a bit unrealistic of a scenario. The U.S. forces did wisely place one of their tanks behind the denuded hill, so it cannot be initially engaged. Off to the left, the vehicle without a turret is the U.S. truck, and then the 113 is on the other side of the palm grove. So you got 2 M48s on the right, you got an M113 and the truck on the left. And then for the bad guys, you've got T-54 up in the sandy area, T-54 centrally located, BTR-50 back behind the village, and their ZIL truck also behind the village. Hills, reinforced buildings, bunkers, crossroads, and bridges are key terrain. So in this case, the hill, whoever occupies it, the referee has to assign some kind of tournament point cost for possession of the hill. The U.S. spoiler alert, maintained control of their side of the game board. And so ultimately it was a US victory, including maintaining possession of that key terrain. The buildings, none of them were reinforced though, so none of those counted as key terrain. The hill ends up being a location where we're going to see the VC use a rare call for fire mission, and we'll see how that pans out later. The weather also had to be set as part of the pregame sequence. In this case, we are looking at the dry season, and we got a result of clear, so no rain at all. The communist player, as mentioned, they get to place civilians and Viet Cong militia after a certain number of turns has passed. And each turn during the admin segment, I had to roll for each of the huts. There was a 1 in 6 chance that those figures would appear on the board. Ultimately, I think 3 of the huts ended up being populated by the time I called the game. Here is another. This is just the number of forces that are in those. So civilians were the white dice. So in this case, the first HUD had like 5 civilians, then 2 civilians, then 1 civilian, then 3 civilians. And then the colored dice down at the lower right, that's for the, he chose to take some of them as militia. That would be 2 militia and 3 militia respectively. Didn't have an effect on this game. And here's kind of a diagram I made to lay it out. So the VC were going to appear, the VC militia was going to appear in the central hut and the northeastern hut. Okay, here we are going with the first activation roll of turn 1. In this case, blue represents the free forces and orange or red represents the commies. The commies had the larger element activated. We have no modifications here. It's mostly armor with anti-tank, a 2-person anti-tank team in each of the APCs. So no platoon leader is on the board, so no modification of this dice. I'm still monkeying around with this activation table. As you can see, I've made some hand edits here. So they can activate a single officer or NCO. In this case, nobody chooses to dismount, so that doesn't really factor in. And you'll see that vehicle activation is slightly different. But the activation role is still important in an armor versus armor engagement to determine which one has the smallest element and therefore gets to choose to go first or defer movement. As mentioned, US has an off-table fire support mission they can call in, which is smoke in this case. That is 30 inches long across the board. They choose to immediately call in their call for fire. They make the roll, and in this case, a 7 is successful. 7 or better is successful. There were no modifiers that applied in this case, so straight up 7, and they nailed it. So their mission will take place. They had to determine the positioning of the smoke screen, the center of the smoke screen. I placed a white poker chip on the gaming table to represent where the middle of the smoke screen would fall. And they're going to angle it kind of, the north side of the board is furthest away from where I'm standing in this picture. So they're going to angle it from the northwest to the southeast when it does arrive on the table. I guess this this is out of order. I should have already shown you this. Anyway, the VC are making their call now for radio, I think. What are we doing here? Oh, no, position. This is the roll that I make for when the artillery, those smoke rounds are going to arrive. They're going to arrive in 1d3 turns. So I rolled a 3. That's going to be 2 turns. The 1 indicates that it will arrive on that turn before both sides move. But as we'll see later, I monkeyed that up. And so all fire missions took place after both sides moved in that turn because of my error. It's hard to keep track of a lot of things when you're running the game, trying to document the game, and also trying to explain the rules at the same time. Now, this is the communist roll to determine whether or not they'd be able to call in their bombing mission. They rolled a 9, which is successful. And the 1, I think, indicates that it's going to be 1 turn away when they get the bomb. I think that's what I put there. Bombing strike is a little bit different. It will require the player to trace the path of the airplane because the deflection or over under depends on the path of the aircraft. So when we get to the bombing run, I determined basically the plane ran from north to south straight at that hill and made it easy on myself. As far as as far as when the strike would take place, it too would take place on turn 2. So there's a delay of 1d3 turns. I rolled a 3, it's 2 turns later. And again, I rolled before both sides move and goofed this one up as well during play. I had to place the position of the marker so that black dice with the 2 indicates not only the turn when it will fall, but also the position of the center of the bombing circular error probability prior to being adjusted for, the miss factor. Vehicle movement. So to move a vehicle required an activation roll, and if you wanted to fire a vehicle, like if the vehicle is going to be part of your activated element movement portion of the turn, right? You have to be able to meet or exceed this number. However, if you want to just fire the vehicle, that requires no roll at all. Interruptions we'll look at in just a few moments. So vehicle movement, in this case, roll 2d6, and I rolled a 5. This was a, let's see, that looks like that's to the right of the palm tree. So that's an APC. So, and that should say APC, not AFC. Wow, an error in the rules. I need to fix that. The vehicle is going to move out, not so much this turn. So it's not going to be able to activate. The gun itself, so you'll see there's an arc of fire listed. It's good to have a little protractor. So you've got to kind of keep track of where the turret is. I don't think the turret is going to be a major impediment to players because an electric turret can rotate 180 degrees and still fire all within the same turn. A non-electric turret, as in the case of the T-54 and the M48, is going to be able to move 90 degrees during a turn. So it never really came up that an undamaged turret was not able to rotate to meet a target. And it's not like you can't, with a moving vehicle, pivot as well. Especially since I think it's 27 degrees to left or right of center of the barrel of the weapon. So in almost all cases, I was able to take the shot with rare exceptions for line of sight being broken by a terrain feature. Special interruptions. So wheeled vehicles, tracked vehicles, and aerial vehicles can be interrupted as they move across the board. This kind of special interruption can only be done by a limited number of devices, right? And in all cases here, you're seeing that the interruption is not including a main gun for any of the tanks that are on the board. There's a reason for that. They get to fire during their activated element sequence. So I did not think that having opportunity fire and it just seemed like it was too much. So all the guns take place during the activating element phase of the turn sequence. Hope that makes sense. Fire to or from a vehicle. So if you're a ground troop firing at a vehicle, or you're a vehicle firing at a vehicle, or a vehicle firing at a ground troop, it uses a different to hit roll in the advanced game rather than the to hit roll that you see in the basic game. And this to hit roll does not have a modification for short, medium, or long range, which I might modify this, although I do not like the amount of slowdown that would incur. If I've got to constantly be measuring distances to apply a -1 or a +1 modifier, that's just going to slow down the pace of the game and the fun. And as you'll see, the vehicles can absorb quite a bit of damage, so I don't think that extra oomph is necessary. In most cases here, this target stationary, fire stationary, target in motion, turret stabilization, all this stuff, these are enough modifiers. I don't think adding modifiers for long and short range are going to contribute to the fun here. I think it's going to bog down things. So in this case, we've got a 7 with a +2 modifier, or I'm sorry, we've got an 8 with a +2 modifier, which is a 10, and that is going to be successful. I went back and forth on this section about whether to have 2d6 rolled for the penetration value or 1d6 rolled for the penetration value. And where I think I've landed is I would have to redo the tables not to use 2d6. 2d6 is definitely going to apply for larger caliber weapons. For light machine guns, however, LMGs are going to roll 1d6 is where I landed on this. That keeps the balance in the game as far as penetration. So the way it works is you're a vehicle, you choose to fire, you have to make a to hit roll, but you also, if you're firing at a vehicle, have to succeed at a penetration roll. In this case, we are firing a 90 millimeter main gun, which has a penetration value of 11. So since this is the 90 millimeter gun, we're talking about the US forces, and that's trying to penetrate the front of, I assume I was shooting at the T-54, which had a 20. It is, the T-54 and 55 have powerful armor. Yeah, 20 here on the front. So my roll here of 2d6, I add 11 plus 2d6, and if it meets or exceeds this value, then it penetrated the vehicle and I can apply a damage roll. In this case, I rolled a 4. 4 plus 11 was unsuccessful. And here we're seeing the return fire on the VC portion of the turn from a tank that's in the sandy area trying to fire back at uh, my exposed M48 Patton tank. Same situation here. He rolled a 4 modified with a +2, +1 for being the target being stationary, +1 for the firer being stationary. Total roll here is a 6, which is not successful on the table. I rolled for the other vehicle. It seems that he fired both of his tanks, and this one rolled a 10 modified with a 2, so that's a roll of 12, so that is a successful hit. I think I'm indicating here that the hit was aimed at the 113 APC next to the Palm Grove. I was firing a 100 millimeter large bore main gun, which has a 12 as its penetration value. I rolled a 6. 6 plus 12 is an 18. Against the frontal armor of 113 of 5 means that is a successful penetration. The damage that you do with a large bore main gun like that is 4d6. I rolled an 11, 12, 13, 14, right? 14? 11 plus 3 is 14. Correct. Yeah. And then the damage gets applied to a particular, that damage gets applied to a particular subsystem. So I think here I'm rolling the 3. Yes, it's against the mobility of that 113. An armored fighting vehicle. Oh, I've got AFV and APC. I think I need to simplify that. Okay, don't get bogged down here. 10, it only requires 10 points for that particular subsystem to be destroyed. In this case, the mobility of that 113 is destroyed because there was 14 points of damage from my 46 roll. And so I just placed a red token in the engine block area of the 113 to indicate that's a mobility what we would call a mobility kill. It's not a true kill, but it is a mobility kill for that 113. And since it's sitting out in the open, that's bad. Bad news. So the first tank shot from the commies was not successful. Second tank shot against the APC was successful. Moving on to turn two, the commies roll higher, uh, and so the U.S. gets to choose to whether or not to go first, to activate first, or defer activation. In this case, it looks like I rolled for the commies. So the US must have deferred activation here, or I just got confused about who I should have put first. The commies in this case were rolling. In both cases, they were stationary, the targets were stationary, and both of them rolled very well. So that's going to be two main guns shooting and two main guns hitting. The question will be whether they penetrate or not. Again, we're looking at large bore main gun with 12. 12 plus 5 is 17. That is going to penetrate the 113 again, doing another 46 points of damage. In this case, what is that? 7 and 10. That's 10 more points of damage. And then against my, I think that's a tank. Yes, against my tank, there was 11, 12, 13 points of damage. In both cases, we're looking at the subsystems that would be affected. Turret in the first roll case. Turret on the AFV um, only had 5 points in its um, in its bucket, so to speak. So that turret where the Ma Deuce machine gun is mounted, uh, in the TC position, is now unable to turn. The gun is still available as an option, but the gun cannot rotate. So, and since the vehicle can't move or pivot because it's a mobility kill, that gun now only fires in that 45-degree arc of fire, 27 and a half degrees left and right of where the barrel is currently pointed. So that was fairly important early on. Against the tank, it looks like the shot was against mobility. Again, that was a fairly good roll. Let's go back to what it was. It was 11, 12, 13. 13 points against mobility. The tank had 15 points of mobility, so almost disabled it. I'm not sure what this dice roll is, but as you can see, I've indicated with a yellow marker that the mobility on that tank is almost destroyed with the die turned up to 2 to indicate just 2 more points left in the mobility subsystem. Vehicle movement. So again, vehicles are trying to activate. In this case, I'm trying to activate my tank that's behind the hill to get him away from that bombing run location. A bit of meta play here, I suppose, but also considering the fact that I'm getting my 113 is about to go, I want to get that other tank into the fight. And I can't because I rolled so poorly. So he's stuck behind the hill. The other tank tries to activate to move, and again, I roll a 4, which means that he is not able to move out either. I suppose the driver is having trouble with the engine, would be a meta way to explain it. Looking at the 27 and a half arc here, it looks like that the main gun has a good shot across the board. I'm just trying to give you another view of how you can maybe look at things on the table and quickly determine how to hit. It's a bit of an experiment here to see if you could just look through a clear protractor like that and determine whether something fell within the arc of fire. And I think the answer is yes. Uh, if you wanted to do it more precisely, you can lay down a ruler. In this case, I'm looking to hit their APC that's minimally exposed there. I do have line of sight on the edge of that APC, as it turns out. It's very clear here. The BTR 50 has a 6 for its frontal armor and 4 for its side armor. I was able to penetrate. I rolled damage here of 46, and it's pretty significant. That's 19 against the vision and commo subsystem, which knocks it out. So let's say there was a platoon leader inside that was coordinating things, or a captain that's coordinating an entire company. Now he can't see or talk from inside the vehicle and would have to dismount with an RTO to accomplish his mission. So didn't really apply in this scenario. So that hit those points could have been better spent elsewhere. I'll tell you that. And now I finally realized that I have forgotten to drop my smoke and I've forgotten to drop my bomb. Here's the smoke once it's deployed again from northwest to southeast across that center point. You can still kind of see the poker chip peeking out from underneath uh, the third 3x5 card. And you see the initial placement of the bomb sheaf, which will cover that tank, meaning the tank has to be volunteered for all 10 of the dice of damage that gets applied. We'll get there in a minute. Bombs. So I have to indicate a little bit of an accuracy adjustment here. And the dice roll was 1, which means it moves to the left 1d 2 inches. I just went to the left from my position instead of to the left from the direction of the plane. I guess I should have moved it the other way, but it didn't matter in this case. If I would have moved it the other direction, it still would have covered part of the vehicle. So the vehicle is definitely impacted by the bombs. And now I've got to nominate damage dice. I get to nominate 1 or 2 dice at a time. And as I'm nominating these dice of damage, I'm also figuring out what subsystem they apply to. So in the first 2 cases, those 4 dice all get applied to the mobility subsystem. So that accomplishes a mobility kill and a red marker goes down on the tank. So now he is stuck behind that hill and basically out of the fight. Good move for the commies. And here are the remainder, dice numbers. Let's see, we did 2, 4, this is 6, 8, and 10. So the left side are applying the rest of the damage dice to subsystems 6 and 6 and 4, which turns out to knock out the turret rotation and the weapon on the turret, not the main gun, but the Maw Deuce, gets reduced to 1, I think. Or I could have that flip-flopped. Either way, that tank is not effective anymore. And here I've put a die at the end of the smoke. I've incremented the turn counter which is represented by the cards. So we're in turn 3. I've decremented the die that I put at the end of the smoke screen to indicate that it's going to be drifting this turn during the admin segment. And then I've also rolled the 2 dice, the 2 colored dice, for who gets to activate. In this case, again, the lower dice roll goes to the commies. The commies get to choose to defer or move. Again, vehicles are trying to move. Here, the commies must have deferred because I'm dealing with U.S. movement. This tank is trying to move to get out from behind that smoke screen. I've come up with a brilliant / stupid plan to rush that tank forward for the U.S. side. I roll an 11, which indicates he can be activated to move. And then I measure the movement. He goes through that smoke screen and he still has a little bit further to go before he gets to the dunes. And I try to decide, should I take the full movement or just stop there? Since ranges aren't a factor for vehicle and vehicle fire, that's not what I'm really considering. What I'm considering is opening up my flanks to a flank shot. That would be bad. Here we're looking at the 7.62 M60 light machine gun doing 1 point. I think in this case I was trying to do an interruption and see if I could take the BTR and shoot the side of that tank and have any effect. And the answer is not really, no. I rolled 2d6, so 4 plus 1 is 5. And I think at that point I decided that light machine guns shouldn't be able to shoot at tanks and get 2d6. The commies both attempt to activate their tanks, rolling a 7 and a 6. So one of them is going to be able to activate, or is this the to hit rolls? I think these might be the to hit rolls. 1 hit, 1 miss, maybe? Yeah, 1 hit, 1 miss. 16. So I take the large bore gun, 12. I add to that 6, 7, 7 and 2 is 19. 19 is greater than 16, so that was a successful penetration. It looks like this is getting applied against the hull in this case as the subsystem, subsystem one, and I did 7, 8, 9, 10 points of damage to the hull. The hull has 38 points remaining, so I put two d20s out there to indicate 38 points remaining on the hull. The other rule that I wanted to test out was vehicles ramming vehicles, a little bit of Mad Max here. You can read through these, but basically tank versus tank. It's going to be, again, using the 2d6 system with some modifiers. So the ramming vehicle in this case is the same class, so no modifier. It's just a straight up 7 or greater on 2d6 to be able to accomplish the ramming. So that commie vehicle is trying to ram the US vehicle on the side. The roll was 7, so 7 was successful. He does 5 points of structural damage. And again, it's against subsystem 1, which I think is the hull. So yeah, we decrement the hull down some more. So now the commies have rammed my vehicle, they've shot my vehicle. That commie vehicle is moving, and I think I forgot to make the activation roll to see if he actually could move. So I move him up on the flank, and that is pretty much the end of turn 3, with the exception of moving the smoke screen 3 inches. And I rolled a d8 to indicate direction. So north is 1, northeast is 2, east is 3. I recommend a d8. I'll put this in the rules. It's not in the draft rules, but basically it's going to be moving to I guess I must have been incrementing that counter. Anyway, it's going to be moving 3 inches to the east. And so that was fairly easy to accomplish. Smoke screen moved, and this is the last turn it's going to be up. Now we're moving on to the next thing. So what is going on here? Yeah, it took shot. That's what happened. This was a shot from the commie tank into the side. So go back here. Commies got a 2. They were able to activate first. The tank that had just rammed into the US patent tank, that T-54 now fires his main gun at point blank range into it, hitting subsystem number 6 and doing 9, 10, 11 points of damage. The other commie vehicle, and again, I think I forgot to make an activation roll, he dashes forward his tank to try and go after my 113, which was behind the smoke screen. Yeah, he's making a shot. So that was his shot, was a roll of 8, which was successful because the target vehicle was stationary. So even though he was moving, which was a -2, the target vehicle was stationary, which is a +1, so it was a -1. So it was still a 7, modified to a 7. It's a hit against subsystem number 5, vision and comms, doing enough damage to destroy the vision and comms now in my 113. So I've got 3 subsystems are completely wrecked in that 113. At this point, the US side now chooses to actually activate its anti-tank team and get them out of the back of the APC. One anti-tank gunner with a recoilless rifle goes into the palm grove, and the other is able to reach the scrubland. The palm grove one is trying to use the APC, obviously, to kind of screen himself, and the other guy is just straight up balls to the wall, going to shoot that tank right in the face. The distance, I realized that the guy in the palm grove might have a shot at the flank of that other tank. Of course, it's through the smoke screen, which is going to be a -3 to 2d6 dice roll, which is a significant negative modifier, but yet there's no ammo to keep track of, so why not take this shot? The ranges do come into effect somewhat in that there are minimum ranges for some of these weapon systems. Now, it's always possible that people might want to add that +1, -1, for short range, long range. So I don't think I'm going to remove this from the rules. I think I might just put a designer note that for faster gameplay, leave that stuff out. And here are the shots from the two anti-armor troops. Rolled an 8 on the left, which is going to be modified with a -3, which is going to be a miss. And then I also rolled an 8 on the right, which strangely, oddly, I rolled exactly the same on the to hit rolls and the damage. Damage from a recoilless rifle is 2d6. So one hits, one misses, and the damage here is going to be um, 8 points if he penetrates the armor, which I think he does in this case. Oh, maybe that's the visibility roll. Scratch what I just said. It's a visibility check to see if they remain hidden. Those two eights. Oh, I guess I got eights all around. Yeah, so successfully remained hidden even though they were firing weapons, which means they can't be targeted, which is good when you're a ground pounder if you stay hidden. I've got a rather long-winded story about playing the Op 4 in Germany, uh, dashing in and out of a pine tree nursery against some tanks, playing the anti-tank gunner. Had a lot of fun doing that. Believe me, tanks can't see shit. So it's not shocking here that this roll would indicate something so outrageous. First, the guy in the palm grove is behind a smoke screen. Second, there was no clear way for the tank to indicate. It was on the flank of the tank's turret. Anyway, there are all kinds of narrative reasons why neither of these guys got spotted when they fired recoilless rifle rounds. But just be aware that this can this can be used to narrate things for an RPG. And again, one of my design features here is the ability to expand this later into an RPG, should I so desire. So, where are we at here? Yeah, they cannot be targeted by direct fire. So they're hidden. I or did they fail that roll? Why did I put the bead on marker? Man, I am just screwing up this narration. What's going on over here? Looks like I rolled a 9 for some reason. This must have been to activate that vehicle. That's right. I wanted to back up. That vehicle that had been rammed by the commies, I wanted to back up my Patton tank. Vehicles can back up in reverse 6 inches so long as they pass their activation roll, which he did with a 9. So he backs up 6 inches. And then he is able to fire his main gun. His main gun, uh, he got a 9, which is good. He was moving, but the enemy target was stationary this turn. He strikes him in subsystem 6, which is the turret, doing 10, 15 points of damage, which uh, exceeds the 10 points of damage the turret can sustain. So that turret, as you can see marked now, is got a red token on it. And we're moving into turn 5. Turn 5, the commies roll a 2. Again, they will have the choice to defer or activate first. Fratricide. So here is a consideration. Fratricide is when the path of fire is within 1 inch of a friendly figure or vehicle, and the fire will roll snake eyes. So that's a very low probability of a fratricide here. That was one reason why I had that commie tank on the right pass by the M48 Patton because I did not want him. I did not want that pile up of commie tank, commie tanks sandwiching the 48 Patton because if one of them fired the main gun at the Patton and happened to roll snake eyes, it would have hit my other commie tank, and that would have been a bad day. It's just bad tactics. You'd never do that on the battlefield, right? If you're same thing, you'd never do that in any kind of gunfighting situation. Always be aware of your target and what is behind the target. Okay, vehicles running over. I also wanted to test out this rule, which means that one of my commie vehicles is going to attempt now to run over the U.S. recoilless rifleman that is out in the open. This does not require, because this is not direct fire, it doesn't matter whether he's hidden or not, he just has to move toward him. And what we'll see is that if the vehicle manages to run him over, great if the result of this 2d6 rolls is doubles. If it's not doubles, then the figure gets to flee the number of pips on the two dice that are showing. In this case, that tank is going to run down that infantryman in the scrub. Scrub does not reduce that tank's movement. That tank rolled in 8, legitimately rolled 2 4s, which means that anti-tank gunner is dead. He's been run over. And now the tank is not only able to see the other infantryman in the palm grove, he is able to be in the backfield of that M113. So pretty decisive move there by the commie player. Let's see if anything is going to change here. Main gun, of course, you have to be at least 2 inches away for the main gun to be able to engage. In this case, that's more than 2 inches away. That dude could have a very bad day coming because I'm not going to unbutton and pop out my TC to use the Dishka. I think it's a 7.62. I'm not sure if it's a Dishka or not. It's not a Dishka. It's a 7.62 on top of that tank. I'm not going to pop out my commie TC to use a machine gun when I can engage that guy with my main gun and splatter him everywhere. So I roll and snake eyes. So a complete miss doesn't matter. Here's the other commie tank. I think he's trying to activate at this point. Uh, yeah, I think he was trying to activate and couldn't, and therefore he is looking to see if that main gun can still clip the um, the M48 that's way out there in the front. And the answer is yes. Now I am likely to change that rule. Um, I think somewhere in the rules I've got the center of the figure. So if you're talking about figures on the ground, you've got to be able to have the center of the base of that figure inside the arc of fire. But I had no such rule written down for vehicles. I'm pretty sure I'm going to add that, although, and again, this 3x5 card is oversized for the scale. I don't think I should have allowed this shot. And here's where I'm kind of, you know, here's where I'm mulling about that, right? And so I don't think I take that shot. What is happening here? Looks like I'm taking a shot with somebody. I think that's the recoilless rifleman taking a shot. Yes, he's taking a shot. He hit because he rolled a 7 plus 2, so that would have been a 9 because he's stationary, and the tank that he's aiming at the flank of up there north of the pond is also stationary, and it is within his arc of fire. So that's a successful hit. His penetration value is 6. He rolls a 7, so 7 and 6 is 13. The side of that tank, the armor was what, 12, I think? So that was a successful penetration. The recoilless rifle does 2d6 points of damage, which in this case is 9. It applies to subsystem 4, and subsystem 4 is weaponry, 5 per weapon. So that actually knocks out one of the weapons on that tank. So now you see two red tokens on the turret of that tank. So not only can it not traverse the turret, one of the weapons is out, and I think it was the machine gun, though, not the main gun. Down here, we've got the 113 taking a shot as well with its turret. Or not the 113, I'm sorry, that's an M48. Taking a shot as well. He rolled a 5 multiplied with a +2, so that's going to be a 7. That's going to be successful. And it must have been, I want to say it must have been machine gun because he only did 7 points of damage to subsystem 3, which had 15, which is not an, oh, he does 4 point. So what is that dice roll? Because that was my to hit roll. That was my penetration roll. 7 plus the main gun was sufficient to penetrate the armor on the side. Mobility is targeted, and mobility got 10, 14, 16 points of damage, which is enough to destroy mobility, which is only 15 for that tank. So it gets a mobility kill now. So it has three. I rotated the turret on my one tank that's back there behind the hill and tried to take a shot and missed with a 4. So that's complete miss. No fratricide because the angle was not within 1 inch of that 113. And here's where we end up with at the beginning of turn 6. The commies did not roll lower this time. The U.S. forces did. So U.S. gets to decide whether to defer or go first. I think at this point I was considering wrapping it, but I did make one more move for the commies after I took my shot here. So my tank that's behind the hill was shooting at the tank that was over there in the scrub. Got a pretty good shot on their rear. Rolled a 8, which is going to be modified up to a 10. And yeah, the ruler here was simply to indicate the angle, the direction of fire. We already talked about who's going first. Uh, Looks like that was a hit against the vision and combo system, doing 10, 15 points of damage versus a tank's vision and combo system. That knocks it out. So yeah, the recoilless rifleman here takes another shot. He rolled a 7. He's stationary. The vehicle up there is stationary as well. You can see the mobility kill with a red token on that tank. So good shot here. Uh, of course, this figure remains visible because once visible and not, there are rules that apply to visibility during the admin segment, making them be able to go re-invisible, but he continues to just fire recoilless round after recoilless round and is going to remain visible and vulnerable potentially. But anyway, he shoots, he gets a 7 with his modifiers. That's going to take him to a 9. Uh, that is going to be against subsystem 2. I think that was successful penetration. Um, nope. Well, I guess I am misremembering things at this point in the evening, guys. It's late on a Sunday. I'm reconstructing an entire battle just by looking at snapshots, so I apologize if I've made some errors here. Um, what are we doing here? That must have been a main gun shot because main guns do 4d6 worth of damage. So he took his shot, which he rolled a 5 plus 2, which is 7. Yeah, my M48 US Force fires against the Kami T-54, successfully hits, successfully penetrates, hits the weaponry subsystem, and applies 9 points of damage to a piece of weaponry, which would have knocked out the other gun, right? So now both guns on the top of that tank are gone, and he's a mobility kill. That tank is pretty much combat ineffective at this point. What are we doing here? Another attempt to ram, I think, and it's unsuccessful. So I moved the commie tank behind the Palm Grove, tried to ram into the back of the US Deuce and a half, failed at that roll, and ran out of movement right about there. I think at this point that was a dice roll for the 113 to get his gun into action. Nothing really doing. Looking at the state of the board here. So let's just recap, right? The commies have some little yellow tokens. So the VC in 2 of the buildings have come onto the board now, but they're not unhidden. The village is full of civilians. They've got a truck there. They've got a they've got a BTR 50 that they can't move because it got hit in the engine. So they can evacuate using that truck all those people. Their T-54 in the middle of the board, north of the pond, is knocked out. Its weapon systems, its turret, its mobility completely useless. The communist tank in the lower left corner here, the southwest corner, has minimal damage, but even though he's on a bit of a rampage, he's not in a good position because he can still be shot in the rear by that other tank that the U.S. has behind the hill. And there's still another U.S. tank up there in the middle of the board that can still move and get its turret turned around and into action. So it's not looking good for the commie player. The commie player decides discretion is a better part of valor and just decides to end and leave this area of operations. So it's going to be a U.S. victory here, though the U.S. 113 had a mobility kill. The turret is in op, its vision and commo systems are knocked out. There's another tank up there with some significant hull damage and mobility. Its engine is on its last legs, its turret is goofed up. And then there's another U.S. tank that had a mobility kill. And again, I think it was its machine gun was knocked out. So a bit of vehicle mayhem. It ran pretty smoothly. I was surprised. I'm gonna sand down some of the rough edges, but in general, this was a highly successful test. We had a ramming attack. We had a guy that got run over. We had numerous recoilless rifles. We saw a bombing run. We've seen smoke on the board, and we've seen how vehicles move and shoot and get damaged and shake things off. So I would say this was a very successful play test. Let me know what you think if you're still with me. Have a great day.